The sun hung low over the quiet streets of Springfield, Illinois, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood. Officer Ashley Williams adjusted her rearview mirror as she sat in her patrol car, idly scanning the traffic ahead. Her partner, Jake Thompson, tapped his pen against his notepad, jotting down observations from their earlier call. They were parked near Maplewood Avenue, where the neighborhood transitioned from modest single-family homes to upscale condominiums. That's when Ashley's eyes locked on a sleek black vehicle cruising past them. The driver, an African-American woman dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, had her hair neatly styled, her posture upright and poised. Something about the way she carried herself seemed to irritate Jake. "Look at that," Jake muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. "Fancy car! Bet she's up to something." Ashley looked up from her notes. "She's not speeding or breaking any laws," she replied cautiously. "What's the problem?" Jake ignored her and reached for the flashing lights. "Let's find out," he said with a smirk, pulling onto the road behind the car. The driver slowed and signaled before pulling over to the side of the street. Her movements were deliberate, almost practiced. Ashley noticed her shoulders stiffen slightly through the rear window as Jake parked and stepped out of the patrol car. "Jake, this doesn't feel right," Ashley whispered as she hurried after him. "You don't even have probable cause!" "Stay back, rookie," Jake snapped, his hand brushing against his holster. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a suspect when I see one." As they approached, the window lowered, revealing the driver, a woman named Naomi Harris. Her expression was calm but wary, her dark eyes assessing the two officers with quiet determination. "What's a woman like you doing driving a car like this?" he muttered. Ashley stepped closer, her hands clenched at her sides. "Jake, this isn't protocol. We don't have probable cause to search her things." Jake waved her off, not even bothering to look up. "You've got a lot to learn, rookie. This is how you keep the streets clean." Naomi's voice hardened. "Officer Thompson, you're violating my rights. You have no reason to search my property." Jake straightened, holding up one of her credit cards, as if it were a piece of incriminating evidence. "You don't get to lecture me, lady. You're in my town now." A small crowd began to gather on the sidewalk, their murmurs growing louder. Several people had their phones out, recording the scene. Naomi noticed but kept her eyes on Jake, refusing to look away. Ashley's chest tightened as she saw Jake step back toward the car, his hand sliding into his pocket. Her pulse quickened when she noticed a small plastic bag between his fingers, a bag he hadn't taken from Naomi's belongings. "Jake," Ashley hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned into the car and slipped the bag under the driver's seat. Turning back to the crowd, he held up his hands dramatically, as if he'd just found a treasure. "Well, well," Jake announced loudly, holding the bag of white powder for everyone to see. "Looks like we've got a little drug situation here." Naomi's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and anger flashing across her face. "That's not mine," she said firmly, stepping toward him. "You just planted that in my car." Jake smirked, his expression dripping with mockery. "That's a nice story, Miss Harris, but it's not going to hold up." The crowd murmured louder, their voices filled with disbelief. Ashley felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had seen it happen. Jake had planted the evidence. She knew it was wrong, knew she should say something, but fear kept her rooted in place. Naomi turned her gaze to Ashley, her eyes pleading. "You saw what he did. Please say something." Ashley's throat felt tight, her voice trapped somewhere between her conscience and her fear of retaliation. She could feel Jake's eyes on her, daring her to speak out. "Stay quiet," his gaze seemed to say, "or you'll regret it." But Ashley couldn't shake the image of Jake slipping the bag into Naomi's car. Her father's words echoed in her mind, a lesson he'd drilled into her since she was a child. Integrity isn't easy, but it's what makes you a good person. "Jake," Ashley said, her voice trembling but audible. "This isn't right." Jake rounded on her, his face dark with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. Keep your mouth shut." Naomi stood tall, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. "You can't intimidate your way out of this. I know exactly what's happening here. And so does your partner." Jake stepped closer to Naomi, his hand resting ominously near his holster. "You think you're untouchable because you drive a nice car? Let me tell you something." That's enough, Ashley snapped, louder than she intended. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't back down. You're crossing the line. The crowd had grown larger now, and the weight of their stares bore down on the scene. Jake hesitated, glancing around at the onlookers. He clenched his jaw, but didn't say anything. Naomi took a deep breath and looked at Ashley, her voice calm but firm. Thank you for speaking up. But this isn't over. Ashley nodded, a spark of determination flickering in her chest. For the first time, she felt like she had the courage to take a stand. Jake's face twisted into a sneer as he turned his attention back to Naomi. The crowd was still watching, phones raised, documenting every second. He leaned closer to her, his voice a low growl meant only for her ears. You think you're smarter than me? You think these people are going to help you? Naomi met his glare head on. I don't think, Officer Thompson. I know I'm smarter than you, and you just made the biggest mistake of your career. Jake's composure cracked for a moment, but he quickly masked it with a scoff. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt, stepping toward Naomi. You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. Ashley felt her breath catch in her throat. This was it, the moment where she had to choose between her career and her conscience. Her father's voice echoed in her mind again. If you don't stand up for what's right, you're just as guilty as the ones who do wrong. No, Ashley said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She stepped between Jake and Naomi, her hands raised defensively. This isn't right, and you know it. Jake's face flushed with anger. Move out of the way, rookie. Don't make me report you for insubordination. Ashley's voice wavered, but she didn't move. You planted that evidence. I saw you. I won't be a part of this. The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the onlookers. Naomi's expression softened slightly, her gaze locking on Ashley. Thank you, she said quietly. Jake's fury boiled over. He stepped closer to Ashley, jabbing a finger toward her chest. You're done. Do you hear me? I'll make sure you never wear that badge again. Ashley squared her shoulders, summoning every ounce of courage she had. If that's what it takes to do the right thing, so be it. Naomi, sensing the moment was at its tipping point, decided to speak. Officer Thompson, she said, her voice steady and commanding. You might want to think carefully about your next move. Jake laughed bitterly. Oh, yeah? And why is that? Naomi reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. Both officers tensed, but she didn't flinch. She pulled out a leather badge holder and flipped it open, revealing her credentials. My name is Captain Naomi Harris, she said, her tone calm but firm. I'm the new commanding officer for this precinct. For a moment, there was only silence. Jake stared at the badge, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Ashley felt her knees weaken as the weight of the revelation hit her. That's not possible, Jake stammered, his confidence crumbling. You can't be. Naomi interrupted him. You didn't even bother to ask before deciding I was a criminal, did you? But it shouldn't matter who I am. Every person deserves to be treated with respect, not judged by the color of their skin or the car they drive. Jake's face paled as the crowd erupted into murmurs. Some people cheered, others shouted angrily at him. The gravity of what he had done, what had just been exposed, seemed to sink in. Ashley took a small step back, her mind reeling. Naomi turned to her, her expression softening. Officer Williams, I'm grateful you found the courage to speak up. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. Ashley swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I should have done it sooner. I'm sorry. Naomi nodded, a faint smile on her lips. You did it when it mattered. That's what counts. Jake, still in shock, finally found his voice. Captain, I can explain. No, Naomi cut him off sharply. You can't. What you did today goes against everything this badge stands for. Hand over your weapon and badge. You're suspended, effective immediately. Jake's hand shook as he unclipped his badge and holster. He glared at Naomi, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. You can't do this. You don't know what it's like out here. I've been protecting these streets for 20 years. Naomi's expression didn't waver. Protecting? Is that what you call this? How many lives have you destroyed with your prejudice, Jake? How many people have you framed to feed your ego? The crowd, now emboldened by Naomi's presence, began shouting for justice. A woman in the front yelled, You're a disgrace to the uniform. Another added, We've been dealing with this for years. Ashley glanced at the growing crowd, her nerves fraying. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about a system that had let officers like him operate unchecked. Naomi stepped forward, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the noise. "This isn't just about me," she said, turning to address the crowd. "It's about holding people like him accountable. It's about making sure that no one is above the law, not even the ones sworn to uphold it." Jake's face reddened as he took a step closer to Naomi. "You think you're some kind of hero? You don't know what it's like to deal with the real criminals out here. You sit behind a desk while I'm out risking my life." Naomi raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unwavering. "And you think that justifies planting evidence? Using your authority to intimidate and degrade innocent people? You're not risking your life, Jake. You're ruining others." Ashley felt her chest tighten as she watched the exchange. She'd always known there were cracks in the system, but seeing them this close was overwhelming. Naomi turned her attention back to Ashley, her voice softening. "Officer Williams, I know this isn't easy for you, but speaking up today took courage. Don't lose that." Ashley nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't." Jake, still holding his badge, looked at Naomi with a mixture of resentment and desperation. "You're making a mistake, Captain. People like you don't last long in this job." Naomi stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "People like me? You mean people who believe in justice? Who believe in equality? If that's a mistake, it's one I'll gladly make." The crowd erupted in applause, their voices drowning out Jake's protests. Naomi turned to the nearest bystander and said, "Thank you for recording this. Make sure it gets shared." Jake's face twisted in fury. "Throwing me under the bus for optics? This is all a show!" Naomi didn't flinch. "No, Jake, this is accountability. Something you clearly don't understand." The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. Naomi stood tall, her presence commanding, as Jake reluctantly handed over his badge and holster. His shoulders slumped, and his bravado crumbled under the weight of what had just happened. Ashley watched, a storm of emotions churning inside her, relief, guilt, and a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. As another patrol car pulled up, 2 officers stepped out, their eyes darting between the crowd and the scene in front of them. Naomi waved them over, her voice firm and clear. "Officers, escort Mr. Thompson to the precinct. He's suspended, pending a full investigation." Jake's face turned a deeper shade of red. "You can't be serious. This is my precinct, my team." Naomi didn't even look at him as she replied, "Not anymore." The crowd cheered as the officers reluctantly led Jake away. Some shouted words of support for Naomi, while others demanded justice for the countless people Jake had wronged over the years. Naomi turned to face the crowd, her voice rising above the noise. "This is just the beginning," she said, her tone resolute. "Today, we're taking a stand against corruption and prejudice, but it doesn't stop here. It's up to all of us to demand accountability and ensure our system works for everyone." The crowd responded with a wave of applause and shouts of agreement. Ashley felt a lump in her throat as she realized the magnitude of the moment. This wasn't just about Naomi or Jake. It was about the community reclaiming its trust in the people to protect them. As the scene began to wind down, Naomi approached Ashley, her expression softening. "You did the right thing today," she said. "I know it wasn't easy." Ashley nodded, her voice barely audible. "I was scared. I didn't know if I'd lose everything." Naomi placed a reassuring hand on Ashley's shoulder. "You didn't lose anything that matters. Integrity is what defines us, not the badge." Ashley blinked back tears, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't felt since she first joined the force. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly serve and protect. A local news crew arrived, cameras already rolling. Naomi took a deep breath, knowing the spotlight was about to shine brighter than ever. She turned to the camera, her voice calm but firm. "What happened here today is a reminder that no one is above the law, not even those sworn to enforce it," she said. "We have a long way to go, but change starts with moments like this." As the crew captured every word, Ashley stepped back, letting Naomi take the lead. She glanced at the crowd, now dispersing, but leaving behind an air of hope and determination. For Ashley, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could